today I actually will be talking about the science of human flourishing, because what I'm really passionate about, well, I'll get to that in a minute, I guess. It's not on the slide yet. What we'll be learning today is what human flourishing is, why it's important, and how to increase our ability to experience it. So today's going to be a little bit like a crash course of information, and bringing the science down a little bit to some education and outreach. And those are some of the things I'm very passionate about. So I love outreach, I love education, I love prevention and advocacy, and I do that in my work at the Penn State Psychological Clinic, working as a supervisor with students in the community, and I also recently started my own business so I could do even more of it because I'm excited about all those wonderful things. So when we think about human flourishing, the definition of human flourishing is when all aspects of the person's life experience is good. Now, good does not mean like it has to be great all the time. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It means generally day to day, things are going fairly well for us, and that if we have challenges, we can figure out what those are and then more quickly than not come back and tend to those issues and then get back to feeling generally good again. So why do we need to care about human flourishing? Well, basically, not knowing what is in our power to live to our full potential makes living hard. When we don't think about what elements of life are meaningful to us, we, have feelings of less power. We feel like we are out of control, right? So lack of power equals lack of hope. We tend to then avoid rather than approach things that actually are very meaningful to us, and then we might get in a habit of constantly avoiding things that may actually drive connection or drive meaning, and then we're left with fear basically as running our lives. So the hard truth is some of the problems that we're facing today, there are Debbie Downer moments, that 1 in 5 children and 1 in 5 adults in the United States are living with a mental health challenge. 1 in 8 internationally are living with mental health challenges and disorders. That's 1 billion people internationally. Mental health conditions cause 1 in 5 years with disability. On an economic spectrum, that's a really big deal and a very big problem. And 2 of the most common mental health conditions, anxiety, cost $1 billion a year in US dollars. Right now, 1 in 3 Americans are not able to afford therapy. We can see how that could be a problem. And here's the cherry on top. Mental health, despite seemingly unending resources, is actually getting worse nationally and internationally. It's not getting better. So how can understanding human flourishing help? Think of it like the foundations of wellness. When you know the foundations of anything, more complicated problems are less challenging to address, and we feel more confident in our ability to address them. Approach them, right? So we have our ABCs, we have our 1, 2, 3s. You go to elementary school and you learn the foundations of math. You learn the foundations of language and writing, right? There's all these things where we have a systemic approach to step-by-step learning. When you know how to do common addition, you now can do geometry later on, right? But where is this when it comes to mental wellness? It's nowhere, and it's needed, desperately needed. So we are naturally inclined to survive. I always say surviving is a must, thriving is a perk, right? So we are inclined to walk, talk, breathe, feelings, thinking, right? So those are things that we don't have to learn to do. We automatically are prone to doing them. But learning how to swim is a skill. Reading, math, and language development are skills that can be developed. Emotion regulation is a skill. Intentional thoughts and behaviors, purposefully doing things, right, and knowing what you're doing is a skill. Thriving and flourishing is also a skill. So the foundations don't have to be complicated, but it's useful if they are consistent, right? So we know that if you go to a different country, your math doesn't change, right? If you go to, if you're thinking about sports, right? Maybe you learn some different techniques, but the foundations are the same, right? So we want to approach mental wellness as skills rather than character. I'm going to see if my little video works. No, it doesn't. There's a horse that jumps over this, right? In slow motion. It's really majestic. Okay, so we want to think about information is step one, right? We know today, we do actually have the information and the science available to make human flourishing and these skills, which we also know and have adapted across various models of therapy, to be useful for individuals across populations, and that's like the general population. It's applicable to most human beings, and also developmental stages, right? So what we need to do is unify information, okay? So what is missing across the spectrum when it comes to human flourishing? We know what these foundations are. What has been documented across areas of study, whether it's engineering or philosophy or psychology, is that we're using a lot of different words to describe the same thing. And a horse by any other name is still a horse. So information, what are the actual human flourishing pillars? Awareness, insight, connection, and purpose. The more we are aware of our day-to-day experiences, our thoughts, our emotions, the things that we are learning about our external world and the things that we're learning about ourselves. Increased awareness leads to increased insight. The more we see, the more we know, the more we explore. That further insight leads to deeper connection with ourselves and the world around us. And that deeper connection ultimately tends to lead to a sense of purpose and flourishing. So although they are 4 separate pillars, they often are leading into the next. And we can see, okay, I'll read this, it's kind of obnoxious, but it's meant to be to kind of prove a point. So we can experience more good when we trust ourselves to experience the full reality of what is both in our control and what is out of our control. Approaching the truth of life brings more options, and that foundation of self-trust supports awareness of choice, and that increases opportunities to behave on and experience choice and thriving. Now, this is the problem with philosophy. It sounds very pretty, but what does this actually look like in practice? So just kind of cutting into some of the science of this information here, right? So awareness, we have definitions for these things. A heightened flexible attentiveness to one's environment and internal cues, such as bodily sensations, thoughts, and feelings, but not limited to, just an example. Insight, a feeling of care and kinship towards the other people and the self, promoting supportive relationships and supportive interactions. Connection, self-knowledge concerning how one's emotions, thoughts, and beliefs shape experiences and a sense of self. And purpose, being clear about one's core values and deeper motivations and being able to apply them in one's daily life. So these skills, although it's very brief, it's not limited to these, but we have skills of mindfulness. Mindfulness is often seen as, something that we do just for relaxation. It's a mental exercise, okay? So having and paying attention. Attention is like a camera lens. You're deciding to focus where you want to see, where do you want your attention to be? And awareness is just being present in all of it, right? So we actually can take these words and put them into actionable steps. What we also can see is, again, unifying information is that purpose, connection, insight, and awareness goes along with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So often if you've ever taken a Psychology 101 course, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a pretty basic model of understanding what steps are required in order to reach to human flourishing. So we have our basic survival needs, esteem needs, safety needs, esteem needs, and then human flourishing. And when we reach purpose and a sense of knowing how to articulate our day-to-day lives and what's meaningful to us, we are much more likely to give back to society, to help other people grow, to help other people thrive. And it becomes a wonderful, beautiful cycle of both contributing and giving back, right? So we can also see, based on how our brain is structured, okay? So some of my clinical doctoral students I was working with are very familiar with this diagram here, but our reptilian brain is fully functional at the time that we're born, okay? That part of our brain is our survival part of our brain, okay? So you don't have to teach it how to do anything. It's already primed to focus on regulating your fight or flight mechanism, okay? So as we grow older, we build our mammalian brain, emotions, reward, and memories, right? So if we are experiencing the world and we're validated in our experiences and we can see connection and that connection is being brought to us, we are learning through our own neural connections in our biology how to have deeper integrated connections, okay? So again, this is not just theory. Neurologically, this is a sequence of cause and reaction and interactions, right, which drive physical, mental, emotional, and biological patterns and processes in our body. And then here at the tippy top, around the time that we're between 25 and 30 years old, we start really developing our ability to regulate our attention, regulate our feelings, complex reasoning, abstract thoughts, language, empathy. All of these are further developed through an ability to be attentive and aware. Now, if we're constantly in a fight or flight, and we feel like our neighbors are going to be attacking us all the time, or we're constantly in a state of war, or we're not safe in our schools, this part of your brain constantly takes over. Because if you don't feel safe, you can't concentrate. You can't use your higher thinking. Able to tend to our basic needs, our safety needs, right? Our survival needs of even just basic sleep and food and clothing. All these things help us focus our attention better and also reach deeper meaning in our lives. My little wiggle of my animals. So we'll get even deeper. Neuroplasticity, okay? Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to reorganize itself both in structure and how it functions. Okay, so everything you do, the better you get through practice and repetition and consistency. So what this is kind of illustrating here is a continuous generation of new neurons in certain brain regions. That means if you want to learn how to ride a bike, yes, it's going to feel scary at first because survival is a first, right? Your brain's like, hey, are you sure about this thing, right? But then as you practice, your brain goes, oh, I know this. And how many people, maybe after you started using a fork when you were a toddler, do you think that much about using a fork right now, right? Do you think about how you're going to get that cup to your mouth when you're drinking? No, they become automatic processes through practice and repetition, and then you don't have to think about it so much anymore, right? So new skills and experiences create new neural connections. No matter how old you are constantly capable of learning, adaptation, and growth. It doesn't mean it sometimes isn't a little harder. And the more you do anything, the better you get. So those synapses then become stronger through practice and repetition. And if we want to decrease maybe problem behaviors, could be potentially smoking, or maybe I'm doom scrolling on my phone at 11 o'clock and I want to try to not do that as much, right? If you practice decreasing that behavior, it will become easier to not do those behaviors, right? So the more you want to do anything, practice and repetition. The less you want to do anything, try to, again, decrease that time that you're actually participating in it, because it will lead to decreased neural synapses. So the bright and the dark side of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity makes your brain resilient. Neuroplasticity enables you to recover from things like stroke, injury, and birth abnormalities. You can learn new ways of being and responding to conflict. In many cases, work through things like depression, addiction, obsessive compulsive patterns, ADHD, and many, many, many other issues. And neuroplasticity means the brain is always learning, but the brain is neutral. It doesn't know the difference between good and bad. It knows whatever is repeated, both helpful and unhelpful thoughts, actions, and habits. Therefore, neuroplasticity may make worse depressive, obsessive, anxious, and overreactive patterns. So we are built naturally for survival though, right? It's not an even 50-50 scale. Your brain has a negativity bias. Your brain and your body are meant to focus on things that are negative first and foremost. So that part of your brain has already had many, many more years and many hundreds of thousands of years of evolution already gaining in that space. And so what we want to remember is that intentional strengthening of our frontal lobe or executive functioning, or our monkey brain, takes a lot more caloric effort. It takes a lot more intentional practice. It takes a lot more energy. And if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you're burnt out, you do not have the capacity to do that as well, because your body's saying, I need to survive, right? So we need to work more with our system rather than against it. So in theory, all this information is really easy to find, okay? So some Canva image I just found, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That is, that's a structure of human flourishing, right? And MIT, Office of Student Wellbeing. Great, mind, body, relationship, yep, that's it too. Hey, over here, the 5 core cell competencies that are often put into like elementary schools for social emotional learning, right? Same thing. We have it everywhere. Give it the same language. So we know individuals who didn't get this in school that maybe we can start adapting it into our programs, right? So this is what it actually looks like in theory. In Canva, he would like go all over the place and he'd be like really crazy. So like just use your mind if you're like lost in space, right? But trying to put mental wellness and these foundations in practice is a lot harder, because we need to unite across disciplines. We need to unite across like whether social workers, psychologists, right, fields of study. We need to create a unified foundation for these concepts. In a world that's predominantly hurting and lacks accessible, attainable foundations of wellness and flourishing, what can we do? We become aware and approach that information. We acknowledge the insight of the reality and practice trust in ourselves to be curious over judgmental. Judgmentalness is something we're all born to do. You can't stop yourself from being judgmental. What you get to do is be aware of whatever reactive, automatic thought, judgment, opinion, perception, interpretation, you name it. When you're aware of it, you can say, do I want to just let that go? Or do I want to change it, right? So we can't stop initial thoughts and reactions. We get to decide how to be aware of them and choose what to do next. We connect with understanding our own experiences to help us empathize with the struggles of others. And we participate in our innate human super ability to exercise proactive choice in the vulnerability of our own truth. And this drives hope and purpose. So proactive choice is us being human beings. No other animal on this planet can decide what they're going to be doing for dinner 5 days from now, right? So how do we choose to exercise that ability? Trust in ourselves leads to increased control of our lives, leading to increased hope and connection, increased sense of purpose and contribution, which ultimately takes us to flourishing and sharing with the world our own unique gifts. So long story short, human flourishing is more than philosophy. It's a culmination of scientifically supported information and evidence-based experiential opportunities, skills, and practice that, again, we know. We just need to learn how to apply them on a systemic level. And the more you do it, the better you get. So what am I hoping you may take from today? You know who you are, right? So be yourself. Now I can say that, right? Like as you say to kids, like, oh, just be yourself. But what do we mean by that when we're trying to encourage children? We mean be your true, authentic self. Be aware of the fragile person that's saying, I really want to do these things, but how am I going to be judged? How am I going to be ridiculed? How am I going to be pushed away for the things that are unique to me and are unique to my sense of purpose? Connect to that person. Connect to yourself deep down in that space and decide what steps that you want to be aware of and that you want to implement more choice in your life. So this leads me now to my end slide. The reason why I started my business Mindcast and the brand Know Your Fundamentals is so I can do my part to provide organized, straightforward, and attainable foundations of mental wellness and human flourishing. So if you're interested, I did put some flyers on the tables. Feel free to talk to me after the presentation. But I have a podcast, social media, but everything is lining to the same goal and mission. The mode of delivery changes, but the information and the organization stays the same. So thank you.